What's up, the internet? It's Kyle. How's it going? I gotta warn you, today's gonna be one of them. I can just feel it. I'm having technical issues all morning. It's gonna be a day, but we're gonna get through it together because that's what we do in this business is we get through it together. But I am so grateful to be here. It is the EXP Expo 2022, the one with all the twos. We're in our 9th day. 9 days of this. So, you'll pardon me if I'm a little punchy. But we want to welcome in someone who's been on the experience before and is a great friend of the experience and always willing to come on and chat and tell us about, her work and that kind of stuff. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome in Krista Gehring.
Hi, everybody. I'm excited that you're punchy today. I think that'll be fun, Kyle. Let's have
It was 3 a.m. when I left here last night.
That's insane.
And I was back here at 7:30 this morning.
Did you even sleep?
Yes, but I think I did most of it in the car in the parking lot waiting for it to warm up.
Were you sleeping in your car before you?
Well, it's like 9 degrees here. So I had to wait for the car to warm up.
Oh.
And so I fell asleep in the car waiting for it to warm. It was the whole thing.
Where are you?
Exactly? Ohio.
Oh,
that was where I was going to start.
Ohio.
Right.
So
I was online pulling up your information. I saw that you went to UC. University of Cincinnati.
I did.
So what was you're not from here though?
No, but I am a Midwestern girl. Okay. I am from Kansas, so I certainly.
So you know about the cold.
Yeah, I know about the cold. I know about the wind chill. I know about the snot freezing in your nostrils. Mm-hmm. I know all about that. And I lived in Cincinnati for 4 years, I think. Mm-hmm. So I'm very used to cold. I lived in Colorado. So living in Houston, it's very strange to be able to wear shorts at Thanksgiving and Christmas. Although right now it's 34 degrees. So everyone's freaking out, Right. So and for me, I'm like, oh, this weather feels so nice, right. As opposed to the sweltering heat that it always is here. So yeah, I went to Cincinnati.
So, okay, I have several questions about that, but I'm just going to bask in the downright tropicalness that is Houston right now. It's basically tropical.
Right.
So, okay, you're in Kansas. So, did you go to Cincinnati because less tornadoes? When I lived in Olathe, it was tornadoes every 3 weeks in the summer.
That's just, and I know where Olathe is. I actually grew up about an hour north of Kansas City in Atchison.
Okay.
So, every time the tornado sirens would go off, you're supposed to go in the basement. We would go outside to try to see, where is it? So I would say that tornadoes, I got used to them. Living in Houston, the hurricanes, that's no joke. If we're going to compare, hurricanes are far worse. So tornadoes are just kind of a walk in the park. So when they say that it's going to tornado here, I'm like, Although it's hard because there are no basements in Texas, at least where we are. So
you'll have to come back and experience the new one, the Snow-nado.
No. Oh.
That's a Canadian import. We don't need but
it makes sense. It makes sense.
So what led you from, to UC? Why did you wind up there?
UC, well, being from Kansas, I wanted to escape. So I think I was the only person in my high school class that went out of state for college. I graduated with I graduated with 24 girls in my class. So, and we had all gone to school together since first grade, Catholic school. So I ended up going to the University of Colorado, Boulder, and I went there for my undergrad and I stayed there for a very long time. And the only thing that really got me to leave Colorado was education. So at one point I left and I went to Boston, to Northeastern University to get my master's in criminal justice, went back to Colorado, and then I got accepted to the doctoral program at the University of Cincinnati in criminal justice. So that's what led me to Cincinnati, to be in that wonderful criminal justice program that, I'm very proud to be from the University of Cincinnati and to be a Bearcat, certainly.
Well, that was what I was going to ask is Cincinnati is known for 3 big things, right? Architecture, engineering, criminal justice, and now pediatric medicine.
Right.
In combination with some of the Dayton schools, Wright State, and some of those, like they've built this kind of pediatric medicine bubble down there that's just world beaters. So when you were at the University of Cincinnati, I imagine it was just the criminal justice and the engineering architecture.
Right.
So what about that program drew you to it, and what do you think makes it such a sought after destination?
Oh gosh, you're gonna get me emotional.
Well, I mean, we could just talk about WKRP, like.
Oh gosh, when I went to Cincinnati, that's where like people were like, oh, WKRP. So the School of Criminal Justice at the University of Cincinnati, I knew that it was one of the top ranked programs in the country. At the time that I went there, it was ranked number 3, right behind University of Maryland and SUNY Albany. I'm not sure what the ranking is. It's still extremely high. It's probably still 3rd, maybe 4th. I'm not sure. I'd have to look. So that was appealing to me. But when I got there, first of all, the professors are phenomenal. They are nationally known, world well known. Edward Latessa, who was the program director there, was phenomenal. He just passed away a couple weeks ago, so we're all still sort of recovering from that, which is, he left a tremendous hole within the criminal justice fields. Such a legacy that he has left. He was there. Pat Van Voris was there. She was my mentor. She did a lot with women in the criminal justice system. Frank Cullen was there. He is a internationally known criminologist. And those are just the instructors that I took, because my track was, I focused on criminology as one area of expertise and correctional rehabilitation as another area of expertise. So we had a lot of professors who were extremely well versed in both of those areas. And the one thing that I really liked about particularly the correctional rehabilitation sort of focus was that as doctoral students, we were encouraged to actually go out into the field. I mean, when I was a doctoral student, I was training correctional professionals on how to work with women in the criminal justice system that were really responsive to their needs. So the experiences I got, the education I got, and actually the connections and the friends that I made. I mean, Ed Latessa really created a family. So it doesn't matter which cohort or which class you're in. Whenever you are with other UC students, we are all sort of one family, and it is phenomenal. I mean, I have my best friend was in a cohort, 3 or 2 cohorts ahead of me. I know people who are very dear friends who graduated there in 1999. I was there in 2006. So just that, I think, really speaks to the support and how much we really care and love each other. I mean, truly. So I don't think you can necessarily find that at many other doctoral programs. So it's really a special place and a phenomenal experience. And I'm very proud to come from that program.
I pulled it up on U.S. News and World Report. University of Maryland, Arizona State, UC Irvine, University of Cincinnati.
Okay, so we're fourth.
Yeah,
I
Penn
knew that
State.
Arizona State and Irvine, they have really sort of come to the forefront, especially concerning who they have there and sort of the production that they're doing regards to scholarships. So, but we're still up there. So
right. Just around at the top 5, Penn State.
Right.
Just because if you're going to do a countdown, you got to end on a round number, right?
Yes, and all of those are phenomenal schools too. So it's an honor to be considered. That your program is in the top 5 with all of those schools as well.
Oh, absolutely. So you're one of those people who have letters that come after their name, PhD.
Yes.
In criminal justice, and the thing that always fascinates me, we always wind up talking about it, is your use of comics as course literature.
Yes.
I went out and bought the first one of the textbooks, one of the Crim comics textbooks, just so I could see what it was and be like, all right, I have it now. I don't understand it, but I have it.
Okay.
So talk to me about how the two things became unified, like comics and criminology.
Okay. So I mentioned before that I went to Northeastern University in Boston to get my master's degree. And while I was there, I met a guy in my cohort. He was a classmate of mine, Michael Batista. And I remember one night we were at some drinking establishment across the street from the school. We probably finished statistics class or something and had to escape. And I remember we were talking about just things that we like to do. There were other people at the table. And I remember Mike saying something about how he would love to have his own comic book. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. Well, I have a bachelor's in English and I was writing creatively and poetry, filled with angst. And I remember saying to him, well, I have a couple stories, maybe we should get together and collaborate. So we ended up doing that. We ended up just sort of fleshing out some ideas. A lot of them were about vampires. We were just writing. I don't know. We had some fascination with vampires, I guess. But we learned that we worked really well together. And it was just for fun. It was a great way to sort of take a break from academia. And, he would do thumbnails of layouts of pages. And, it was just something that we would dream about, but nothing really happened. And I ended up graduating and moving back to Colorado. We kept in touch. Then I went to Cincinnati. Meanwhile, both of us are still sort of consuming comics, collecting comics and reading comics. And it was a medium that he and I were both familiar with. So when I was at Cincinnati, I had to teach intro to criminology courses. And I realized that the students were not as excited about criminological theory as I was, and they weren't reading the textbook and they weren't really understanding really these abstract theoretical concepts. And I was thinking, how could I find something that could illustrate these ideas, these really abstract ideas, in a way that they could understand? And I was reading this book for one of my PhD courses that talked about the theories and sort of placed them in time in these socio-historical context that really made sense. Like, oh, during this time, all of these cultural events and political factors were happening. So that influenced how people thought about crime and criminals, you know? And that made so much sense to me, as opposed to just sort of a laundry list of all these different theories without any context. So originally I was like, oh, I wish there were movies that could illustrate this. And I realized I didn't have any capability to do that. And then I just had an idea like, what about criminology comic books? And I remember calling Mike. This was like 2009. I called him and I said, hey, I have this idea. Maybe we should do criminology comic books. And I remember him saying, I think this is what we were meant to do. So that was where the idea came from. And then, I had him draw up a couple finished pages of the first issue, which was Origins of Criminology. And I shopped it around to some of the publishing companies at these professional conferences that I would go to. And at first, there was one textbook company that's like, yeah, we'll do it. And then sort of put it on the back burner for 2 years. And I remember telling Mike, like, I'm going to go to another company. Like, we don't have a contract with them. I'm going to find another publisher. And then it just so happened within the next week or so, the acquisitions editor from Oxford University Press was like visiting our campus, was in our office. And it was really serendipitous. I pitched the idea to her and she's like, this is amazing. So we ended up signing a contract with Oxford University Press in 2014. And, our first 2 issues were published in 2016. And today in 2022, with all the 2s, we have 10 issues and issue 11 is coming out I think next month. Well, it has to be next month. So we're excited and we're coming to the end because we have a contract to do 13 of these. So we only have 2 more to go and then the series will be complete.
Then we'll know everything there is to know about criminology, right?
Perhaps. I don't know. I mean, so many people are like, oh, maybe you should do this. Or I have other faculty coming to me. I have a friend in the psychology department, and she said, have you thought about this would be great to do for psychology concepts? And I was like, oh my gosh, let's just wait until we get through the criminology ones because it's very labor intensive. To do 1 issue. So
the normal question I would ask as you're coming to the end of a run is, well, will the narrative have a satisfactory conclusion? But I don't feel like that's.
Well, the thing is that each issue is sort of like a narrative in and of itself. They're very much standalone. I mean. But there is this common thread through all of them that ideas cause reactions, that how you think about crime and criminals causes people to react a certain way. And then that influences how you try to prevent it, what sorts of policies that you put in place. So
in a more traditional comic phraseology, I suppose, it's more of an anthology series than it is a story arc.
Yeah.
So
it is.
For those of you watching, if you go out and you can buy them on Amazon right now, like these books. This is where I got my copy.
Nice.
So and they're fascinating. But I have to read them very slowly because I have to Google a lot.
Oh, okay.
Well, just because I don't have the base knowledge that your general student would have.
Right.
Like when they pick up volume 1, Intro to Criminology, they're going to have some idea about what criminology is or criminal justice. They will have studied something. I'm just like, oh, this sounds interesting. I'm going to buy this book.
Nice.
But what was interesting to me, and you mentioned it, is that how time has influenced this field. And it just struck me. I read a book. I just finished it a couple weeks ago. That the phrase "law and order" wasn't even in the public zeitgeist until like the late 1960s.
Yes.
So crime was looked at differently before politicians and things started using it as a talking point.
Yes. Yeah. And before that, people were very much oriented towards rehabilitation and what can we do to improve justice involved individuals' lives.
Mm-hmm.
But you had the 1960s happen where it was like, in the United States, the world seemed to be on fire.
Mm-hmm.
People were getting assassinated, crime rates were up, there were riots,
Mm-hmm.
everyone was using drugs, there was the Vietnam War, like there was a lot of chaos.
Right.
So, Nixon, who was elected in 1968, he was very much, I'm going to establish law and order. And that was his talking point.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of people gravitated towards that because they thought, oh my gosh, everything is going crazy right now. So that really brought in a more conservative, punishment oriented, let's blame the individual person as opposed to social factors that could be influencing the person's criminal behavior. So, yeah, things that we think have been around for forever, have only been around for a few decades.
Right. So, something I was interested to ask you about because this is your field of expertise. One of the trends we've seen in comics this year is this strong pivot, especially from independent publishers and small press publishers, towards true crime, murder mystery, that kind of stuff. What do you think it is, the fascination right now with this particular type of narrative, this particular type of story?
You're seeing that trend a lot because I discovered, I know they've been around for a little bit, but I discovered podcasts, and there was a huge movement in podcasts regarding true crime, especially with the podcast My Favorite Murder. And I think the thing is that everyone has always had a fascination with it, but no one has ever really talked about it, that they are fascinated with, serial killers, or, they watch all the Law and Orders or NCIS or whatever. I mean, you have entire channels that are dedicated to these sort of true crime docu-series, documentaries like the ID channel or HLN, or people are definitely consuming that type of material and consuming it more. And I think that comics are just another way to sort of tell these stories, because there are nonfiction books in the true crime section that have been around for forever. I mean, I remember reading Helter Skelter when I was in high school, and that was written probably, and I don't know what the copyright date is exactly, but I would think like 1970, and that's about the Manson case.
Right. And that's a graphic novel now.
Oh, it is. Huh. Okay. Well,
Right.
I mean, I've read a few. I'm looking at my comics over
one of the
here.
big ones, and I think this is when I started to see the scales start to tip, is when the My Friend Dahmer graphic novel came out.
Yes, I have that one,
which is fabulous. Shout out to Durf Backdurf. From Ohio, ironically. But there was just another one. Did you see what Eddie Gein done? That was Eric Powell. Eric Powell from The Goon. So like, it's a strong trend, and I'm wondering, in your opinion, does the comic narrative, the way the graphic narrative of comics, does it lend itself towards understanding the complexities of these stories more than like what you would get in a news report?
Oh, for sure. I think because what I love about comics is that, first of all, they're engaging as opposed to watching the news. that might not be as engaging as picking up a book with artwork in it as well that tells a story. Second of all, comics can relay a large amount of information in a short amount of time. And it can also get to the goods and sort of sift through all of the minutia and actually tell you in very compelling imagery what actually happens. And in a lot of these graphic novels, it's not just here's the cut and dry, very basic news reporting. There's often a narrative that goes with it. Like with My Friend Dahmer, that was about his experience with having Jeffrey Dahmer as a classmate and a friend. So there's this other sort of personal narrative there as well. And I think that comics lend themselves to have that more, freedom to insert that personal nuance as opposed to a documentary or a news, broadcast. Plus, people are getting into true crime and making graphic novels about them. I mean, the material for that, there's plenty, plenty of fascinating, interesting, bizarre stories that can be told. And the thing is that if you're drawing these images, it might be a little easier to digest for a reader than actually seeing like a crime scene photo. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. There's been that video going around the internet of the police chase where the motorcycle got in an accident and the driver died. And people are like, we need to cover this video. We don't want to see it. But if that were depicted in comics, it would have a very different emotional feel. I definitely can see that.
Right. And the thing is that as human beings, so we want to see, right? Like whenever there's a car accident or you see police racing past you, you wonder what happened. I want to, what can I see? We're always trying to see because we're so curious, almost morbidly, of things like that.
Right. It's definitely, that craning your neck kind of.
Yep.
Right. Absolutely. Yep. Absolutely. So, you've got two more issues of the Crim comics to come, and then do you have a desire to do a more traditional comic story? And do you know what that is, or do you want to explore this kind of educational comics frontier a little more?
Both.
Or is it both?
Both, I think. I mean, Mike and I always talk about, our dream is to have a comic that we create picked up by Image. Like, I love Image comics. Those are really the only comics I read right now. I think the creators there that produce things are phenomenal. So we've talked about it, and we've talked about just ideas for stories, the fact that we work very well together. I'll write a script describing things and he'll draw it and like, oh, that's totally what it's supposed to look like. Like, we don't have a lot of conversations about what the art looks like other than I want you to include this, or I want this person to look like this, or whatever. But I think that would be a dream, to have sort of our own series published by a major publisher. As for education and comics, yes. I mean, I really think that this is a medium that needs to get more traction, especially when you're talking about student engagement and the fact that we know that students are not reading the textbooks, no matter how cool or fun the textbooks are. I mean, if you look at some criminology textbooks now, it's so interesting. There's a lot of pictures, there's a lot of call outs here, follow this link to a website. I mean, all of these things are trying to get students interested in the material and breaking up the sort of the text and everything. But I think if you can have things that are easily digestible and can contain as much information as a textbook, then why not use that? Because, research has shown that when people read just text, or if they read text and the comic together, text and images, that people recall similarly or better the information that they've read in the comic. And I know that when I use these Crim comics when I teach my criminology course, and students, it's so funny when I ask them about a particular concept, they will describe the image to me from the comic that they read that concept is in. So it's like this melding of sort of memory for them. Not only do they remember the concept, but in the comic they remember the scene that concept was introduced. So I really feel like that sort of solidifies that memory and sort of deepens that learning.
I'm trying to figure out how to phrase where I want to go from here with this. And I guess the best way to ask it is what do you see? You mentioned it. Students don't read the textbooks, and that this is a great way to engage with students. I have a friend who is a director of admissions at a college,
Mm-hmm.
and he says that in his opinion, higher ed as we know it won't exist in 10 years. Just because innovations like this are happening, where it's higher ed as we know it. I mean, he's been in this for 50 years, right?
Right.
So he's talking about the amount of innovation that's happening really with online schooling, with new methodologies being brought in. So with that in mind, how do you keep it fresh? Especially with, you're going to have your 13 books. What happens when the next story comes out, when the next thing happens that changes the whole of the field?
Well, I feel like with these comics, one thing that I remember Dr. Cullen telling me from Cincinnati when I first told him about this idea for Crim Comics, he said, you want to be the first one to the party, and then everybody else will imitate you. So I feel like with comics, especially in this discipline, Mike and I may be the first innovators, and I wouldn't be surprised if other people followed. I would encourage that because there are plenty of other topics in the discipline that could lend themselves to comic books. I mean, I'm just touching on criminology, but there's policing, there's things in corrections, there's victimology, there's hate crimes, sex crimes. I mean, all of these sorts of things that there's a wealth of information that could be adapted into a comic book form. And I think to your point with that higher ed isn't going to look like this in 10 years, I think that that's okay. I think that we do need to evolve. I mean, if you look at other professions like the medical field, I mean, they're constantly having to evolve based on technology, based on discoveries, they wouldn't survive or be effective if they just said, nope, we've always done it this way, and this is how we're going to do it forever. And I think in education, especially with what we know and what we're learning about how people learn, and that the fact that a lot of the learning is starting to occur online, whether it's because students, it's more economical for them to take online classes, it's more it's easier for them to take online classes because they have a lot of things going on. It's more flexible, whatever. Okay, if students want to take classes online, then as instructors, we need to make it so that our online classes are just as good as face to face. And it's possible to do that, but that is our responsibility. We can't sit back and say, oh, these students, all they want to do is just take online classes. Okay, if that's what they want, then it's our responsibility to make sure that we can meet them there and make sure that they get a great education. And if higher education transforms into something that doesn't resemble what it was 20, 50 years ago, I think that that's necessary. I mean, there is resistance to people to acknowledge that comics should be used in the classroom or that these are scholarly publications. Crim Comics, it's published by one of the top 5 textbook publishers in the world. And these are peer reviewed. I mean, I have like 5 to 11 other peers looking at the content and reviewing it to make sure that it's accurate, it's correct, it's conveying all the information it's supposed to convey. So I think the fact that it's a comic in this form, that's what people might be resistant to, because they think of comics of like superheroes or something that's juvenile. And you and I both know that comics can be phenomenal when it comes to the stories that they tell. They win awards. I mean, the writers for many comics are by far surpass many just regular fiction writers, so.
Right. No, absolutely. I mean, and I just keep pointing to when people say, "Oh, comics are juvenile or for a less developed whatever." I always point to things like The Nuance of the Watchmen.
Yes.
Or there was a book that came out, I don't know if it was last week, Rain from Image Comics. It's David Boer adapting Joe Hill. But that's a book that the amount of emotional maturity that book takes to be able to handle. Like, we read it for review, and both me and my co-host were like, "Look, we can't. We're gonna need a couple weeks to process this book because it's heavy." So I love that you said that there's this mentality that is changing as the industry changes.
Yeah.
So
well,
I
I
know,
wrote down Rain. I need to pick that up.
yeah,
that
I know Jen has copies, but
okay.
if you can't get it from her, let me know. I know where I can get you some. So.
Oh, okay.
But like, so I know you have Hard Out in a few minutes here, so I want to we got about 20 minutes left, so I wanted to ask a big question and then some fun questions, but we'll start with a fun question.
Okay.
Because you mentioned it again, University of Cincinnati.
Yes. Oh no.
Can you explain Skyline chili to the rest of the world? Because like I tried the other night and it's like, it's just such a part of my DNA that I'm like, yeah, it's the best. What about it? Like,
Kyle, I think you and I are going to come to blows about that because
I don't necessarily love it. I just can't explain it. It just is.
Well, I don't love it. I actually have fights, well, not fights, but arguments with people. I had a colleague, Dr. Barbara Bellbot, who was in my department, and she was from Cincinnati. And every time she would go home, she would take a picture of like the 3-way or 5-way or whatever it was and send it to me. And I would be like, that is gross. But she loved it. Right. And Skyline chili, I guess for me, I was raised with chili that had beans in it, and that was a little spicy, and we didn't put it on spaghetti. And I can understand putting it on spaghetti, though. I really can, but I just don't like the taste.
Oh, sure.
And the cheese is like this mountain of, I mean, it's insane.
Sure.
But Cincinnati, Skyline, I think there's also is Gold Star another one
Yeah,
in
Gold Star's still there.
Cincinnati?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And then
I
there's
prefer Gold Star to Skyline.
okay. Okay. Well,
Um,
I prefer none of them,
well,
but I know that there is definitely a humongous fan base of Skyline. And I'm told that, 4 o'clock in the morning is the best time to eat it,
it's
after
fresh and you're drunk.
exactly. So I
Yeah.
mean, that I can understand, but
Right. Is it safe to say that Skyline Chili is the Taco Bell of chilies?
oh,
Like
yes.
I'm trying to like I always
Yes.
struggle to explain it to people, and like it's like trying to explain Kansas City barbecue to people, right?
Yeah, well, that's
It's its
delicious.
own thing. Like it's not
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
Kansas City I don't know how to explain it to you any other way than to say that. Like Skyline Chili is Skyline Chili. It's all there is to it. So
But it's not, yeah, but it's not a chili that people outside of Ohio would recognize, really.
right.
So, yeah, that's my take on Skyline.
Yeah. So all right. So back to serious conversations.
Okay.
I know you're a huge horror aficionado.
Oh, how could you tell?
I didn't need well, yeah, right. But is there a story, a horror story, a movie, something that you've read or seen or heard about that really has your motor running in terms of like you're very excited for or you really enjoyed or you think other people need to know about?
Oh, are we talking recent? Are we talking in the past? I mean, there are things in the past 2, 3 years that have come out that have really blown me away.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I mean, when you were saying that, I was thinking Hereditary.
Okay.
Hereditary was like nothing I'd ever seen before. And Toni Collette is just perfection. She should have gotten an Oscar for that. And that movie haunted me for weeks. So that was something that I thought was really a phenomenal piece of work. Um, but it's really, if you're just getting into horror, it's not something that I would necessarily recommend to watch because it's heavy and it's disturbing, and you definitely go on a wild ride. But that's probably one of my recent favorites. And I just saw Scream, the new Scream in the movie theaters, and that was surprisingly good. I was definitely entertained. It had a great storyline, and I actually cried.
I wouldn't call the new Scream particularly scary.
No, it's
Uh,
very
the
meta.
right. The originals like at least had that psychological kind of all right, they get your adrenaline up so it's easy to scare you. This one doesn't do that so much, but it's a fun afternoon at the movies.
It is, and it's definitely like the previous ones because it's a
Mhm.
whodunit, right?
Right.
You're constantly trying to figure out what it is, but I really like the whole discussion of the requel because we're seeing a lot of those now with, Halloween, with Scream. I know that on Netflix they're going to have a Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which I'm very excited about. So yeah, I read books about horror, I go to horror conventions.
Mhm.
I have in my office, I'm looking at 3 curio cabinets of horror action figures. Like, I just love it. You know, it's a genre that they touch on a lot of issues that no other genres discuss, and it's very subversive. And I like I like being scared, but I also like being intellectually challenged a lot of times and seeing things that I'm like, oh, I've never seen that before, or oh, that taps into something deeper than just, a scary monster in the closet,
Right.
So
So if you were called on to write a new horror graphic novel, what kind of story would you tell?
oh gosh, I'm trying to think like what sort of scares me the most when it comes to horror movies. Is that what you're kind of going
Well, I mean,
for?
would you tell a slasher story? Would you do a psychological horror story? Would you tell a ghost story? That
No,
what
I would
what
have
kind of story would you tell? Would it be a real the names have been changed to protect the litigious kind of story? Like
I think no ghost stories. Those things don't scare me unless it's like an Asian ghost story, like
right,
Japanese
like some of the
horror.
real ones. Like
That stuff really is creepy and scary. I will say that one of my favorite horror genres is the slasher, but I don't know if that would be an appropriate sort of genre for this time period. I feel like slashers really sort of had their heyday late 70s into the 80s, and now we really don't know how to do them very
you
well.
should check out Maniac of New York.
Maniac of New York, what year
Uh,
was that?
last year.
Oh,
Yeah, it's and the second volume's coming out now from Aftershock Comics.
okay, I'm gonna write that down too. So, I think what I really like is psychological thrillers. I think that would be something, which is so funny because people who like those movies, who like things like Silence of the Lambs or Seven, they categorize them as psychological thrillers, but they're really horror movies. There are horrific things in those movies. They elicit terror at times. I mean, I
Right.
remember in Silence of the Lambs when Clarice was in that storage unit and she found the head in the spoiler alert. She
Right.
found the head in the jar. I mean, that was like, oh, So I think that's what I would do. And along with the true crime, I mean, I think that would be kind of fun to find a really interesting story that was both bizarre but intriguing and do a comic about that. Why not?
Right. No, it's I was trying to explain to a friend of mine. They called me a sociopath because I don't get scared at movies. And I'm going, no, you have to understand that the thing that scares me are the 7 or 8 things that are going on in my head
Right.
while we're watching this movie.
Right.
So I'm trying to figure out who the killer is or whatever. You're worried about the jump scares. I'm trying to figure out where the weird twist that's going to scar me for life is.
Right. And I think the thing that we often forget is that regardless of what genre it is, a movie is a piece of art,
Right.
and you are consuming that art form. It's granted it's not in a museum, it's not a painting, but it still elicits emotion. It still is something that can be moving, whether it's to cry or to laugh or to be afraid. So, a horror movie is a work of art. It is a vision of, somebody's idea, the screenwriter, the director, whatever. And we all react to it differently. And because you don't get scared doesn't mean you're a psychopath. It just means that your consumption and thought process and what you're doing is just different than your friend who's scared.
Right. Right. I'm like, you're just a chicken.
Yeah.
I know that somebody's going to jump out at me like in 30 seconds because
Right.
it's been 2 whole minutes.
Right.
Like I know it's coming, but I'm actually trying to figure out the plot. Right. It's dumb.
Right.
Do you have a favorite comic book that you've ever read?
Gosh. Yes, I do. Chew. Um John Layman and Rob Guillory. I love the Chew comic. It was such a unique idea. Rob Guillory's artwork is so bananas. I think the story, I really, really loved that whole series. I have all the I didn't stumble upon it until later, so I didn't get the individual issues, which I wish I had. But that's phenomenal. And then, of course, I mean, what really got me into realizing that comics weren't just superheroes was Sandman. I mean, Sandman is that's I mean, there's almost no words for
Have you
Sandman.
listened to the audiobooks of Sandman?
No, I've been told that I should listen to the audiobooks. Okay. Gosh, I'm just writing down everything that
Right.
I need to do.
They're I am a massive consumer of audio books. I don't have a ton of time to read, but I
Yeah.
sit at the office a lot while editing video, and so I have a lot of time to listen to things. And
Nice.
so I'll go through 50 or 60 audiobooks a year. And last year I listened to Sandman twice, like volume 1 and volume 2 through twice. It's that good.
I
Neil
wanted
Gaiman
to
as the narrator, James McAvoy as Morpheus.
Oh, nice.
Kat Denning is his death.
I saw in the comments that Dirk Manning says
Mm-hmm.
that he loves my books. Thank you, Dirk. I just want to say I appreciate you saying that. That's very sweet.
We I'm gonna make a joke and just know it's a joke. We don't acknowledge Dirk. His head is already too big.
Okay. All right.
Dirk
So
and I are
clearly
neighbors,
you
so
know Dirk.
if Dirk's head gets too big, I can't drive down the road.
All right. Well, Dirk.
No, it's kidding. I love Dirk, and Dirk's another horror nut. He's always got good horror recommendations too.
Oh, nice. Good.
Yeah. So, I actually asked him that same question. Okay, what horror thing should I be watching? So let's do some fun questions.
Okay.
Pancakes, waffles, or French toast?
Pancakes.
Interesting.
Hands down.
Yeah.
From Harris County Smokehouse. So anyone from Houston, go there. Their pancakes are the best.
All right. Very specific pancake recommendation.
Yes.
I like that.
Yes.
All right. Do you have a favorite serial killer?
Huh. I would say Ed Gein because he was very much the sort of impetus for the book Psycho, the movie Psycho, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Silence of the Lambs, Deranged, Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things. So he's been a real inspiration for a lot of horror movies. So yeah.
And
And
I'll tell you what,
he's bananas, you know?
that graphic novel is just incredible.
Okay, I'll have to get it. What's it called? What's it called again?
I'm gonna blank on it. It's
Something
did you
about
see what Eddie Gein done?
Okay.
Let me I've got a give me a second. While I ask you this, you're on the island, Professor and Marianne are there, so you have electricity, but you don't know how long it'll be until the Globetrotters find you. Okay? You get
Okay.
one book, one movie, and one album.
Oh gosh. Okay, one book. I would have to say, gosh, one book, one movie, one album. One book, Dracula. One movie, Halloween. And one album, Pink Floyd, The Wall.
Those are all really good answers.
Oh, thanks.
It's Did You Hear What Eddie Gein Done by Harold Schechter and Eric Powell.
Oh yeah, Harold Schechter. He has written a lot about serial killers.
Mm-hmm. He does a great job on it as well. Okay, so with our last couple of minutes, where can people follow you? Where can they support you? Where can they buy Crim comics if they're interested in learning? If they're interested in doing that, where can they, find out what you've got going on?
So if you are interested in purchasing Crim comics, you can get them on Amazon. You can either search Crim Comics, one word, or you can search like Crim Comics issue 1, Crim Comics issue 2, because oftentimes when you put up Crim Comics, not all of them show up at the same time. So there's up to 10 issues. So if you can't find them all in one place, you might have to search per issue. You can also go to the Oxford University Press website and purchase them. Get on Google, type in Crim Comics, Oxford University Press. They're all there. And then Barnes and Noble. I mean, if you just type in Google Crim Comics, there will be some option for you somewhere to purchase them. If you want to follow me on social media, I have a Twitter account. It's Krista S, as in Sue Gehring, at, Twitter. So at Krista S Gehring. And we also have a Crim Comics Twitter account. It's Crim Comics OUP. So it kind of looks like Crim Comics Soup. That is on Twitter, and that same handle, Crim Comics OUP, is on Instagram as well. So you can get the latest and greatest information about when Crim Comics is coming out.
Awesome. So I want to thank you for being here. Is this your third or fourth one of these with us now?
Third. I did you guys talked to me, and then I ended up interviewing Jeremy Holt, which was like awesome.
Shout out to Jeremy. Hopefully they're feeling better. They were supposed to be here today, but they're down with the computer virus that's going around, COVID.
Oh no, because I know that they have like a book tour next week in New York. So I hope that they
I think that's why they're begging off just another weekend of rest.
Right.
So, and good on you.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Okay. So that was Pride, and then I think you were here for the paper anniversary, right?
Yes.
Or the post anniversary. Yeah.
Yes,
yeah.
I think so.
Awesome.
So I love coming and talking to you all. This is great. You ask really great questions, and I'm just so grateful that you all are so supportive of my work. This is really nice to have this sort of platform to discuss it on.
Well, we appreciate you, and we appreciate the work you're doing. And anytime you want to come back, just holler. I sent you the link for the Eddie Gein book.
Oh, nice. So, thank you.
So everybody else, we will be back later on today in a few hours. We've got Scout Comics. We've got Fabrice Spolaski coming up. We've got our publishers panel with Josh Starnes of Red 5 Comics, Dinesh Chandamashi of Bad Idea, Travis McIntyre of Source Point Press. We have Mog Park and Envu. Yeah, I had to look at my calendar. Coming back later, live drawing with a chance to buy that stuff later on today in their sketch and bid show. And we have our dance party tonight. Tomorrow, we have Austin Janowski, David Pepos, and Arvell Jones, Marvel legend Arvell Jones, who I'm sure will have some great Stan Lee stories. He always does. So we will see you guys the rest of this weekend here on the EXP Expo.